All right, we are going to be learning about modification commands today, so let's talk about that. So we've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11, 12, 11. No, we have 12 because there's one more. This is actually a typo right there. So we'll be talking about all these today. And you won't have a new assignment for today, but your assignment that you get on Monday, which you will have an assignment on Monday, will deal with your modification commands. So we'll just breeze over these today, hopefully, and then we will talk about adding levels to your projects, which will be pretty important. So let's see here. Does anybody have any questions on any of the drawing commands that we worked on last time? Not yet, probably, right? Okay. I'm going to open up the architectural template again here, just a blank file. We'll start from there. All right. And I'm just going to draw a few things here. And I'm going to initiate my wall command, and I'm going to just use my line tool and wall command and my pick tool. I'm going to use an offset of 15 feet. And we're just going to create a few things here. Oop, there we go. Oh, I've got a little duplicate there. And we'll create a couple of horizontal things happening here. Just draw a few random things that we'll be working with today. All right, again, a lot of these modification commands, for those of you that have used AutoCAD or any other computer-aided drafting program, even SketchUp, I would say, you'll have kind of an edge on this because a lot of these commands are very similar to what we see in AutoCAD, right? So there are probably 3 or 4 that are very dissimilar or are not included at all in AutoCAD, and they're wonderful, and we'll go over those. But not too bad, not too bad. All right, so I think I'm going to start with the align command because I think it's probably one of my most used commands. Let me just draw a few things up here, and maybe a couple little things over here. Right, I'm just randomly drawing just a few. I'm drawing, I'm clicking, and I'm hitting escape, and I'm still in the command even though I hit escape. I'm just drawing, clicking, escape, click, click, escape, right? Click, click, escape. So it does kind of appear that I'm reinitiating a command, right? But I'm just hitting escape in between so that I can kind of draw some random segments. So click, click, escape, click, click, escape, and escape, escape. That's just sort of what I want to see on my screen. All right, so we're going to talk about align today, A-L-I-G-N, which I like to sometimes I'll spell it out because in AutoCAD, when you say align, it sounds very similar to a line, like the line command, L-I-N-E, right? When actually it's not. And we don't really have the line command in Revit, but we're going to be talking about this, the align command. And align, very simply, and it's pretty self-explanatory in the command, it aligns one or more elements with another element, essentially. Okay, now, last time when we were here, we talked about the drawing commands and about how our drawing commands really don't appear to us until we initiate a command or we select an object, right? So you couldn't draw a wall using the line command until you clicked on wall, and then all of your tools popped up here, right? So I'm going to hit escape. It's a little bit different with modification commands. Actually, modification commands they're always available to you. So they're located on the modify toolbar, go figure, right? I click on modify, and here's our modify tool palette. So this is where all of our modification commands are located, or I think the general bulk of them, essentially. Again, we have an icon to execute any of these commands, but we also have a keyboard shortcut, all right? And I'll probably go back and forth using both methods. One thing I do want to bring up before we get any further today, I'm going to come over here to the View tab up here in my ribbon. Okay. Sorry, hold on. There's one other thing I want to do. I keep meaning to download a little thing that highlights my cursor so you can see it easier. And then I don't. Okay. So we'll do that soon. All right, so I'm going to go to View here, and you may probably don't remember this, but if you go all the way to the end of the View tab, you'll see User Interface. And this is the place where I said, hey, if you ever lose your Properties dialog box or your project browser, either one of these two, this is where you're going to go to turn them back on, essentially, right? Hold on, guys. I feel like for whatever reason my mouse is a little bit hard to see. Let me change the color of it for now until I can. I'm going to change our cursor. Can you not do that anymore? There we go. Okay, maybe it's, there we go. At least it's darker. Maybe you can see that a little bit better in Revit. Whoever's teaching AutoCAD won't like me because the background is black. But so under user interface, if I click on that, you have all of these checkboxes, and those turn essentially tool palettes on and off, right? So if you lose your properties dialog box, or if you lose your project browser, this is where you can turn it back on or off, right? But another thing that it does is it also shows you right down here keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. And this is where all of the keyboard shortcuts for Revit can be found. And you can see there's a lot of them, right? And I just wanted to show you this area because this is where you can also assign, and change keyboard shortcuts if you want to, right? I would give you some advice. Number one, don't change them here very significantly. But when you're at home, instead of coming in here and maybe deleting a keyboard shortcut and adding another one, I would just add a secondary or a third one to your keyboard shortcuts. So for example, align, A-L-I-G-N. I go up to my search menu, it says align, and I see align right there, and the keyboard shortcut is A-L, right? When I'm at home, so I'm going to click there, I'm going to press AA and hit assign. Oh, and it says, oh, wait a minute, adjust analytical model has that keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to type in adjust, analytic model, AA. I'm going to click on that. It's really easy to change these. I'm going to click on that and hit remove because we're not going to be using that command in this class. And I'm going to go back up here and type align. It's here in user interface. Yep. Keyboard shortcut. There you go. So I assigned AA now to align, right? And again, there's going to be a few where this may be helpful for you, but I wanted to show you, number one, where this is at so you could change these if you wanted. But also if you're trying to look one up, right? You're like, oh, I know, I can't find the icon, but I know the command is called, pin. What is the keyboard shortcut for it if I can't find the icon, right? So you can come in here and I can type in pin, and pin is PN, okay? So user interface, keyboard shortcuts right there, okay? Also, I'm going to go back to my modify tab here, all right? You all probably know by now, if you hover over an icon, you get the command and then you also get the shortcut. So align, AL, and everything looks good, okay? All right, so align, AL, or now I've assigned AA on my keyboard. I can use either one of those keyboard shortcuts to initiate the command. But let's talk about how the command works. Align will allow you to take one object and align it with a second or a third or a fourth. It can be a singular type command, or it can be one that you do over and over and over again. All right. But essentially, let me just show you how it works, and then we'll talk through it. AL, click, click, and one aligns with the other. Okay. Wouldn't those of you who use AutoCAD, wouldn't this be wonderful in AutoCAD? Right? All right, I'm going to hit undo, Control Z, align, AL. So the way the align command works is you're going to establish first where you want your objects to align to. Okay, so I want my objects to align to this side of this wall. Click. So I establish a datum point, and that datum point is marked by a blue dashed line. You're going to notice down here at the bottom in my shortened command line, it says, please select an entity to align. It will move into alignment with the reference, right? So again, my little shortened command line down there is telling me what to do. So now I click on this side of that wall, click, and they perfectly align with one another, right? I'm going to hit escape. AL, click, click, things align. AL, click, click, things align. Okay, so I can do it singularly, which I've been doing, but I can also do it multiple alignments in one command. So for example, if I wanted to align multiple items to this wall, if I wanted to align this up here, which will undo that align, and then I wanted to align also this, and maybe the end of that wall, then I could use a multiple alignment. So I'm going to type AL, align, and you're going to notice up here in this very tiny little area of my screen, why can't they make it bigger, right? I have a checkbox for multiple alignment. So here's one of my big pet peeves about Revit. I have probably 2 or 3 of them, but this is one of them. I feel like it takes a lot of time for you. I mean, you have a keyboard shortcut, AL, right? But then you have to go all the way over here to this tiny little checkbox, hopefully get your cursor perfectly on it, check mark it, and then come back over here to create your alignment, right? So it's a little bit of a weird or a break in your workflow, but it is what it is, I guess. So I'm going to click on my alignment point, the datum I want everything to move to, and then I can click multiple things to align it to that point. So I can click. I can come up here and I can click. I can come over here, zoom in to the end of this wall, click, right? So align is not just whole objects like this whole piece of wall. It's things like the end of this wall, right? I can come over here, click. Oh wait, they're overlapping, which is fine. I'm gonna hit escape. Okay, but really kind of, I'm gonna hit Control Z to undo that. The idea behind align is once you've drawn some geometry, right? I talked about how not most of the time, but some of the times I don't get everything quite precisely drawn, right? I get things mostly there and then I have to alter them to get them perfect, right? And so this is one of the commands that will help me do that. I can get things mostly correct and then I can use align to align them to other objects or things that will make them the right dimension, okay? If I hover over the align command, the icon right here, this little video I think is a good illustration. So if I want to align that wall or the bottom wall to that top wall, right, there's a perfect illustration of where you would use align, okay? I use align for everything, walls, doors, windows, furniture, reference planes, right? Really anything that ends up going in my model. If I need to move something, usually I'm moving it with a purpose and I'm trying to align it with something else, right, that makes sense. And so I use align for a lot of different things, okay? Again, I will probably next week, what I'll do is I'll draft a little bit on screen so that you can watch me use all of these commands together to create just a little project. And so you can see how everything kind of works together to create, you know, a model on the screen. All right. Any questions about align so far? Pretty easy. The next few commands, move, offset, copy, scale, mirror. Those are all commands that you see in almost every other type of CAD software, CAD, you know, computer aided drafting. So in AutoCAD for sure you see all of those. And And really, they function very almost identical to all of our other CAD programs, other than I think maybe how you go about selecting things. At least my workflow with selecting things is a little bit different, okay? So the next command we're going to talk about is move. And you can move anything in Revit. So walls, doors, windows, furniture, annotation, text, anything that needs to be moved gets moved. Well, Jameson's back. Maybe he can fix that monitor. There's a monitor I think that's not working.
There's a monitor?
But yeah, sorry, you're just getting here. I think that monitor's not working. Mike was saying.
This one? Oh, okay.
I have to say things right when I remember them, otherwise it's out, you know. All right. So how do we move objects? Well, in AutoCAD, when I execute a modification command, sometimes I'll select the item and then I'll hit the command that I want to execute. And sometimes I'll initiate the command and then I'll select something and then execute the command, right? I think generally speaking in Revit, the way that you'll see me functioning with move, copy, rotate, any of those type of commands, is you'll see me selecting an object first and then I'll execute a command, all right? I think it's just, it doesn't feel quite as natural to come up here and click on copy, right? And then to come down here and click on one or two things and then have it function the way I want to, right? And I say that because in other drafting programs, once you select something, it's very common to use like a hard return to kind of set the command. And in Revit, you don't do that, right? You don't use enter to set a command. And so when I initiate the command and then select, I want to hit enter, and it doesn't work that way. So I think my workflow of selecting an object or objects, then executing the command works a little bit better, okay? So to move an object, and the definition of moving an object is just to move an object, right? I can take this and I can move it to another location, right? And I can do that visually or I can do that dimensionally. So I can click on this wall, I can come up and I can click on move. MV is the keyboard shortcut, right? Click. I'm going to come down here and it's going to ask me to establish a base point. The base point for me, I usually will pick in outer space. I don't pick on the object. I pick slightly above it. I select, and I'm going to say this is behind it because I'm going to move it to the right, or I select below it, all right? So I click, I move in the direction I want to go, and I get a little preview of how that object is moving, and I can just freehand it, click, and it moves, right? I don't know how far it moved, but it does tell me 32 foot 10 inches, but I was just sort of guessing, right? With that object selected, I can come up here and click move, click, click a base point, move in the direction I want to go, and I can also type a dimension, 10 space 6, 10 foot 6, enter. Okay, I can move horizontally, vertically, diagonally. Ooh, Elena, you're having some monitor issues too, aren't you? Maybe we need a new cord on that one. Hers is cyan. Oh, maybe you want to push the cord in underneath there?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Somebody's going around loosening all of our cables as a joke, right? Is it blurring? It was your cord? Jokes that architecture students pull on each other, right? Moving your chairs around and loosening your cords. Good. Did that work? Seems like it. Okay. So that's how we're going to move items. And you can move one item or you can move multiple items at a time, right? Move is really, really easy to function with. So I could, for example, grab all of these items at once. Okay, click on move, click, come back over here, specify my base point, click, move in the direction I want to go, type in 15 foot, enter, and I've just moved my objects. Okay. Funny enough, though, unless I'm maybe moving an entire group of things, I don't find myself using move a whole lot, which in AutoCAD I use it all the time. I find myself using align instead of move because it's maybe more accurate in that it will align things to each other, right? So I find myself using probably align a little bit more than I do move. But that is what the move command does, right? So select MV on the keyboard. Click, move in the direction I want to go, 10, enter. All right. Now, that's our formal move command. Another command that you'll see me use to informally sort of move things is what's called a drag. And the drag is where you click on something and you hold your mouse button down. So I am clicking and I'm holding my mouse button down and I move, and you see this is called a drag. So, it seems like a really great idea, right? And I'll say this, I do use it, but I feel like I'm responsible with it. So I feel like I can use it most of the time. I would say that while you're still learning Revit, this is somewhat of a taboo command, especially if you're working in an office. And I say that because the drag command like this can very easily select things that you don't see, okay? And what that means is if I'm in a floor plan view like this, I may see the walls being selected as I drag them across the drawing space here, but maybe I don't see I accidentally picked the floor, right? Or the subfloor or the structural floor below it, or a wall below it on the level below it, or the whole entire linked model that's in there that everybody's working on, right? That you have 80 people working in or whatever. So the drag command, while it's easy and I don't have to type anything and I can just click and I can drag things, right? It very easily selects other things and can, misplace them essentially. And my husband, I probably told you all this, he works at Method Studio right now. And this is so typical to accidentally grab the structural slab when you're in a project working, right? And probably he's working on a really, really big project in Laramie, Wyoming right now, like a housing project. And he'll come home and be like, somebody move the slab again. Somebody move the slab, everything disconnected. And it's like panic, People start standing up, looking around like, who's working on the slab? So, and I would assume it's probably something like this where they were trying to move a piece of annotation, they were dragging a wall or a toilet, and they accidentally, grabbed the slab. So be careful with the drag command until you feel responsible with it or know what you're doing. But that is a good way. You'll see me using it a lot. But even now and again, I do pick things that I shouldn't. So any questions on move or drag? All right, not terrible. We're going to skip offset for now. We're going to talk about copy. All right. Copy will allow you to take one object and it will allow you to make an identical copy of it, either a dimensional distance from the first one or by eyeballing it, right? By kind of free-handing where it goes. So again, I like to select the object I want to copy. You can copy anything in Revit, doors, windows, walls, roofs, furniture, anything you want, just like in AutoCAD. But I'm going to select the object or objects. I can do more than one at a time that I want to copy. And this little guy right here is the copy command. Click. Okay. I can click to specify a base point. And the base point is really just a stationary point that Revit measures off of, right, to determine how far you're going to move or copy an object. So you have to specify a stationary point and then say, from this stationary point, move the object 16 feet, right? But it's all sort of proportional. So it doesn't matter if you select on the object, behind the object, in front of it, below it, right? As long as you just specify 16 feet, that object will be moved 16 feet. So I'm copying, and in fact, let's copy up because I don't want to go over the top of things. Let's say 40 foot, 6 inches. Enter. Okay. and I just copied my objects up 40 foot 6 inches. Now you're going to notice these objects remain highlighted, although the copy command is not active, right? It's not asking me to do anything down here at the command line, and it doesn't appear as if I, clicked or did anything that anything would happen. So if I want to create another copy, I can come up here to copy, click, let's move this over 52 foot 6 and 1/4 of an inch. There's my next copy. Oh, something we haven't talked about yet just happened. Don't worry. A few things disappeared. Okay. Let's try. Oh, nope, that's not what I want. That's what I want. Okay. Now, so what you're essentially seeing here is that the copy command by default is only one singular copy. So I can grab something, I can copy, click, copy, but the command finishes after that, right? There is the option, if I select something, I click on copy. Again, a little tiny checkbox right here, multiple. If I want to create multiple copies and have the command continue instead of end after one copy, I check that little box, click, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm just clicking, click, 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 escape. Okay, so we can copy once, we can copy multiple times, but the multiple copy is not built into the original command, so we do have to specify that, right? So you're going to have to really get into the habit of initiating a command, right? Selecting something, initiating a command, and then before you actually click and start working with the command, you're frantically searching for any other option that you might need to check box before you continue on, right? All right. Any questions on copy? All right. So the next command we're going to talk about is offset. And offset is sort of like, it's two commands in one. It's kind of the copy command and the pick all in one command. But offset will allow you to copy or move a selected element a specified distance perpendicular to that object. Okay? So it's just a really fancy way of saying, I can take this object and specify an offset of 10 feet and it will create an identical copy of this object 10 feet away. And you're like, wait a minute, I think that we sort of already talked about that, right? When we were creating walls, and we did, right? But that offset was built into the wall command, okay? So this command is just a standalone offset, which means I can do it to walls, doors, windows, furniture, right? Anything else. There is, though, the built-in offset command into the wall command and other commands. So, for example, I'm going to go back here to architecture, wall, and you'll notice offset is one of those options. Great, right? But what if I'm not in the wall command? And what if I just know that I want to create an identical copy of this 10 feet away from the original, right? Well, I'd go up to modify, or I just learned the keyboard shortcut so I don't have to go to modify and then the icon, right? But there's my offset, OF, and you'll see it allows you to offset objects essentially by clicking them, right? So pretty good little video there. So I'm going to click on offset. I'm going to give it a distance. Okay, right now we're giving it a numeric distance, which means I type in a dimension. So something like 5 foot, enter. And it says copy, so it's going to copy this original one. Okay, so I'm going to hover over this original one. You notice I get 5 feet, click. And this is a continuous command. Click, click, click. And I can come up here, click, click, right? And you notice I'm panning in the middle of my commands. I can pan, I can zoom. I just like to remind you so that you don't forget. Click, click, and I'm offsetting. Okay. If I happen to have something like a circle drawn in here, right? I could offset that, right? I can offset really any shape. So if I come up here to modify, click, and I choose offset, and we'll do this 3 feet, enter, right? Click, 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 click. You can just go around and start offsetting walls. Okay. Again, this works with doors and windows and walls and furniture and reference planes and a whole lot of other things. Okay. All right. Lots easier to use than in AutoCAD. Well, offset's not terrible in AutoCAD actually, but I feel like this one's really visual, which I like. All right, so we know align, move, offset, copy so far. We have, let's talk about rotate. No, let's do mirror. I'm going to do mirror next. Okay. Mirror is another one of those commands. All of these commands, in one form or another, you're going to find in another computer-aided drafting program, right? SketchUp and AutoCAD and Revit, right? I mean, Revit is technically BIM, but still computer-aided, right? But you're going to see these in every kind of major software. So let's talk about rotate. So rotate will allow me to take an object and rotate it, right? And this is probably a lot easier than you've seen in AutoCAD. The AutoCAD rotate it's okay, but I think, again, Revit's very visual and easy to use. The rotate command is right here, and it's RO. So I can take an object and select it. When I click on rotate, I get a little grip that pops up before the command initiates. And that little grip essentially shows where the object is going to rotate about. So if I rotate this object currently with that grip in the middle, you see how it wants to preview and rotate about the middle. Okay. If I click on rotate again, I'm going to click and hold my mouse on that little grip. Click and hold. Maybe I want to move it down to the bottom and I let go of my mouse. Now if I rotate, it's going to rotate about that point, about the end, okay, instead of the center. So I first wanted to make that sort of clear. And by default, it's going, Revit is going to rotate about the center of whatever entity or entities you've chosen. So I can also pick two entities, rotate, and you see it kind of wants to pick the geometric center between those two objects to rotate, okay? So I'm going to click to sort of establish a base point, which is my kind of zero rotation. And then I'm going to move my objects in the direction I want them to go. So I could click right now, it says 45 degrees. I could click and finish that, and it would rotate those two objects 45 degrees. Or I could type in an angle, 15, enter. Okay. So if I just type in a positive number, it's going to rotate, or no, sorry, that's not right. The Revit still really plays on the right-hand rule where if you type in a positive number, it goes counterclockwise, and if you type in a negative, it goes clockwise. But with that said, I move my cursor this direction, which overrode that positive negative direction. So, and I think that's just easier, right? So in Revit, again, we'll rotate these. I'm going to hit Control-Z, undo. I'm going to select that object, click rotate, click, move in the direction I want to go, right? And we'll type 62 degrees, enter, and it rotates at 62 degrees. Okay, so rotating is very easy. You can move the grip about which the objects are rotated. It's very visual. You can type in the angle. It's just really easy to use, essentially. Control-Z, and we'll undo that. Okay, any questions about rotating? I think I said that. I'm forgetting which ones I said this on now because I'm saying it on everything. But you can rotate anything in Revit. Doors, windows, walls, roofs, furniture, right? Anything that you put into Revit, you can rotate. Okay. All right, so we know align, move, offset, copy. We know rotate. Let's talk about trim. Trim is my favorite command in Revit because it combines several commands from AutoCAD, and I just love it. Okay, so let's see. We're going to trim some of these items, and then we're going to trim a few of these items down here. Essentially, trim will allow you, it's two commands in one, essentially. Okay, so trim will allow you to take two objects, and so for example, this object and this object, okay, and trim will allow you to extend one object to the next, so it's extending, and create a squared off corner, or orthogonal corner there, right? And it trims off or extends any pieces that need to be either trimmed off or extended to create that squared corner, okay? So if we were to talk about an equivalent in AutoCAD, it would be the trim and or extend command used together, right? Whatever was necessary. So trim, TR, or trim, I can come up here, trim / extend to corner, right? It will take two entities and make them into a squared off corner. So 1, click, 2, click, trims them off, right? Those had to extend. But what happens when these two things extend past one another and I want to trim them off so they're clean in this direction, right? Click, click, trims it off that way. Click, click, trims it off that way, right? Good morning. Click, click, trims it off that way, okay? This one will extend, trim, trim, click, click, right? So it's either it extends to create a squared off corner, or it trims off pieces it doesn't need to create that squared off corner, essentially. Okay, click, 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 click. And as you can see, it's a continuous command, so I don't have to reinitiate trim to get it to continue to work, right? I can just go around trimming all of the different things I need to trim. They can really, honestly, too, be quite far away, right? So trim, TR, I can click that one. I can click this one all the way over there. And you notice it does extend over to want to trim. Trim, right? Works really well. There's one. This one's already been trimmed, not to say that I can't do it again, right? So we can create just a mess of trims all over our screen here. There's one. There we go, right? Click, 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 click. Everything is wonderful. All right. So here's our trim command right there. I use trim a lot. Trim and align are probably my top two commands in Revit, honestly. And that's how it works. Any questions on any of that so far? Trim is a little bit more limited in its usage. You can use it at the end of the semester when we get to like detail lines and things. You can use it for detail lines. You can use it for walls. I think that maybe reference planes, but that might be the extent. So it's kind of limited in its usage. But when you do need it, I mean, I use it all the time, honestly, to perfect things. All right, a few more modification commands before we get to our levels, which is kind of a pretty key part in Revit. We are going to look at mirror, okay? So I'm going to delete all these, the other halves of these circles. And I'm going to get rid of this little guy here. Click, delete, hover, tab, click, delete, select, delete. I'm going to get rid of just a bunch of these things, right? Select all those, delete. Okay. So the mirror command is, we have two different types of mirrors right here, okay? And what mirror does is it allows you to take one object and create an identical copy about an axis that you specify. So if we look at that door, do you see they just mirrored one of those, one of those doors. Let's do that again. It's a good example. They mirrored one of those doors across that wall in between. So you have door on one side, you want an identical copy. On the other side of the wall, you mirror it, okay? Again, you can mirror almost anything in Revit: walls, doors, windows, roofs, lots of different things you can mirror. And it is about an axis that you specify. So you see they draw their axes, and then it mirrors that door. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways of specifying the axes, essentially, in Revit. That's kind of the difference between these two mirror commands that we see here. We have mirror about picking an axis, and we have mirror about drawing an axis. All right, so if you are, well, I'll just show you what they look like. So mirroring about a pick axis, again, I'm going to pick the object I want to mirror first, right? Again, my workflow, I just prefer to pick the object first, select the object, and then I initiate the command, right? So I select the object I want to mirror, and I want to mirror it so that it looks like a circle. I'm going to come up here and click on pick axes, click, and it's going to say pick, just like you would use the pick tool, pick the axes you want to mirror about, right? So that can be something like the edge of this wall, right? Or I could pick, I don't know if I can get the center of this circle. Let's see if we can do something else. See, it's picking it. I don't know how that would really work. Oh, it would just do another semicircle over here. I could pick this. That would take this semicircle and it would mirror it about this axis. So I would have one here with the distance to the mirrored axes, and then the same distance apart, I'd have another one, right? So click, and it mirrored it. Great. Click, mirror by it with a pick, click, and it created that second object, right? My axis at that point was just the edge of that line right there, so it mirrored about the edge of that line. So that is mirror with a pick. Let me delete that. Mirror with a pick. See how I'm click, and it mirrors about that axis. So I picked just that edge of that line, but that sort of pretend, or I guess invisible axis kind of extends all the way across here, right? Okay, so let's talk about mirroring with a drawn axis. Okay, drawn axes will allow you to specify an axis by clicking a beginning point and an end point. So I'm going to select my object again. I'm going to choose mirror draw axes with a mirror with a drawn axis. Click. And I'm going to click once, move in the direction I want to go. See my axis is kind of popping up. Click a second time, and I just specified that axis. Okay. Good morning. So most of the time, if I'm using a pick, there's an existing element that I want to mirror about, right? So something like there's a wall in between two doors, something to that effect, and I just want to get the same object on the opposite side of the wall, right? If I'm using a drawn axis, I don't have something maybe in between two objects that I want to mirror, and so I have to draw the axes in order for that second object to mirror about where I want it to go, right? Sort of makes sense. Any questions so far? Not terrible, right? Okay, so we know align, we know move, we know offset, we know copy, we know rotate, we know trim. Trim is my favorite. We know mirror with a pick and mirror with an axis, right? Let's talk about scaling objects, all right? In AutoCAD, this was just a terrible thing, right? Scaling. Not that it was tough, it was just, it's not super intuitive, I don't think, maybe. And once you scale something in AutoCAD visually, you can't tell that you've scaled it unless there's something around it. Anyway. All right. Let's talk about scaling objects. So the idea of scaling an object means taking it from its current size and making it larger or smaller proportionally, according to whatever proportion you want, right? You can make it double the size, which would be a scale factor of 2. You're making it twice the size. Or you can make it half the size, where the scale factor would be 0.5, right? Or 1/2. So Revit gives you the ability to do that, right? So scale, it's got kind of a weird shortcut command, which is RE. Probably SC is taken up with something else, right? So it will allow me to take an object, and in fact, let me just see if I can place an object. Magically pull desks out of the air, right? But hopefully I can scale this object. I think I can. But let me take this desk, for example, and make it double the size that it is now, and I'm pretty sure I can do it with this family. The scale command is this little guy right here. Okay. Again, I'm going to select the object I want to scale, right? I'm going to come up here to, Oh, no, it won't let me. Dang it, it's grayed out. I was wondering. We'll just use a piece of geometry. We'll grab this little guy and CO copy him. Oh, well, that didn't work, did it? Ah, there we go. Okay, so we've got this little piece of geometry. I'm going to CO copy it. So I have two right next to each other, so you can see that the scale does indeed happen. But to scale, I'm going to select the object. I'm going to click on scale. Okay. And I can graphically scale this, or I can numerically scale it. So what graphically means is this line right here is, I should have measured it before I looked at it, but this line looks like it's 9 feet long. Okay. So if I wanted to scale this to, I want to take it from 9 feet to 13 feet. And I use a graphical scale. The way that this command functions is it says, okay, first of all, you need to tell me how big this object is. And I know Revit inherently does know it's 9 feet long, but it wants you to specify, you know, maybe what portion of the object is being scaled. So it could be potentially less than that, right? But I'm going to say, well, I'm going to scale this whole object. So from the bottom point, click, to the top point, click. I've just specified how big that object is. Okay, now this command continues on. So instead of entering, well, I'm going to enter instead of entering a scale factor right now, I'm going to now enter the length that I want that object to become. So I first specify how long it is, and then I say, but I want it to be 12 feet long, right? I don't know what the scale factor is. Maybe that's 1.5 or 2.3, right? I don't know. So in this case, with this type of graphic scale, I can move my cursor and say I want this to be 13'6". Okay, and it doesn't matter what the scale factor is, I just know where I started and where I want it to go. So let me undo that, Control Z. I'm going to scale this again, click, scale. Oh, where am I? Click, okay, there we go. There we go, click once, click a second time to specify the length. Now I'm going to keep moving, or I could shrink it, I could make it smaller. But I'm going to keep moving and say I want it to be 15 foot, enter. Okay. I could also say, hey, I want to take this object, I want to scale it, and I want this instead to be, sorry guys, oops, there we go. I want it to be a numeric scale. So I click on numeric, and I type something like 2, enter, and then I pick an origin, click, and it scales it to be twice the size it was. All right, let me do that one more time. Zoom out a little bit. I select the object, I click on scale, I'm going to choose numeric instead of graphic, and it says, okay, scale a factor of 2, great. Click to enter the origin of where the scale is going to happen. Do I want it to happen from here up, or from here down, or right from the center, right? So I'm going to click the bottom again, click, and it scaled it to twice the size. So we have the numeric and we have the graphic scale, both very easy to use in Revit. But essentially it will allow you to take an object and make it larger or smaller, right? The reason, so I actually was thinking, oh, I'll try and use a desk, right? The reason it wouldn't allow me to scale this desk is because there are other ways that I can make it larger and smaller, and this is what's called a family, okay? All right, we have a couple more things. We have our split command, and we have our pin command, and then we're going to talk about our, hopefully that did pause. Yes? There we go. All right. So, let's see here. We've got, we're just going to do our, we're going to split, and then we're going to pin, okay? So, the split command, not one that I use a lot. There's a specific instance where I can think of using split, and it's usually during phasing. So when we talk about phasing, I'll talk about how split is going to help you with that. But essentially, I'm going to come back up here to my modify toolbar. The split command, we have two types of splits. We have split element and then we have split with a gap. All right. So split will take an object, and I think generally this is probably most used on a wall, but it will allow you to take that wall and cut it. Okay, so it splits the element in two pieces so that you can change one half to another wall type or edit it further separately from the second piece. So I'm going to click on split. A little knife pops up, very appropriate, right? I'm going to hover over the object I want to cut or split. I'm going to click and it splits it right there. See, we get a little blue line. I'm going to hit escape. And now this object is a separate piece from that object. Okay, so I could take this object and I could change it to something else and it doesn't really affect the other object. Okay, split won't work on a lot of things like doors and windows and different families, components that we're going to talk about. It's really, I think, mainly used for line work, like detail lines, model lines, symbolic lines, and also walls. All right. So again, we have split, click, and it splits it, escape. There we go. We've got two elements now. And then we also have split with a gap. And you're probably thinking, well, why do we have two of these, right? And I think my best sort of example is, well, I guess there's a pretty good example too. They're using their split with a gap, it looks like, to create little reveals in their wall system there. But split with a gap will allow you to split an object like a wall, but with a slight gap in between the two. So I could say, I want my joint gap to be, 1/2 of an inch. Oh. Click, and it just creates a 1/2 inch gap right there. Click, and I can make these sequential, click, right? But essentially I'm just creating these little gaps, and you're going to notice that I get all these little locks happening, right? So if there's a little lock here, that means that it split that gap with a 1/2 inch gap, and that Revit is locking that dimension. I can undo it by clicking on it, right? But essentially that is our split with a gap. So not only, I guess, is it used for things like adding reveals to walls, right? But I think maybe probably the reason I use it most is because Revit has a tendency to be sticky with its elements, which you'll run into when you start using it a little bit more. But you tend to get some of these constraints happening. So if I move this, then this follows. Sometimes that happens even if you unlock some of the constraints. And you're like, I unlocked the constraint. Why is it being sticky? Or anyway, but that, and you won't run into it hopefully for a while, but that's the reasoning why I will usually use split with a gap. If my split is being kind of sticky and won't allow me to pull the elements apart or change them independently, which it should, I'll use split with a gap to kind of put a physical barrier between those two objects, right? In the form of space that I can then move apart. So splitting with a gap is fairly easy. Okay, any questions about anything so far? Not terrible, right? Okay, don't be scared. If you have a question, feel free to ask. The final modification command we're going to talk about today is going to be pin, all right? And those of you that use AutoCAD, pin is very much like using the lock, okay? So locking a layer, essentially. It'll take an object and it will, we'll say, it will permanently keep its place, right? Which means that if I pin this object, if I try and move it, delete it, alter it, Revit won't allow me to do it. It kind of holds its place, it holds its location, its length, and all of its settings, okay? Revit is really great at constraining things. It's really, I think it's one of its strengths. And this is another constraint, right? Pinning something constrains it to where it's at. It constrains its location, its length, its properties. And when I first started using Revit, I thought, this program is great. I can pin things down, I can lock them, I can restrain them, more so than AutoCAD, right? I can create relationships between things. But then I started doing all of that and I started getting over constraint in my model where I would try to do anything and something would inherently be related to something else. And then it just really restricted my movement. So I don't tend to, with the knowledge that I have now, I don't tend to constrain a whole lot of things like I used to. But I will pin a few things down, okay? I pin important things down, like the structural grid, right? We should be pinning slabs down, right? Really important elements in your model. The slabs, the structural grid, if I bring in a CAD file as a link, I will pin that down, right? So there's maybe half a dozen things that I will pin down in my Revit model. But again, pinning things down just essentially locks them in place, okay? So I click on my object I want to pin down, and when I do that, the little thumb pin, or what is that called? It's a thumbtack, right? The little thumbtack pops up here, click, and it's pinned, and I see a little thumbtack right there, right? Sometimes I feel like Revit uses terminology to just be different than AutoCAD when you're like, why don't you just call it locking it down? Which is what we do in AutoCAD. You're owned by the same company, the same people use your software. All of a sudden we pin things instead of locking them, right? I guess it doesn't matter. But so if I want to unpin this, while it's selected, I can click on the unpin here, click. I can repin it, right? I can come up here and unpin there, repin. Okay, but when something is pinned, if I try and grab it and move it, won't work, right? If I try and change the wall type, oh, it does work. Didn't used to work. Maybe they've given a little bit of leeway, and we'll blame it on 2019, right? But it'll stay in place, right? And I can't change a lot of things about it, essentially. So pinning is helpful. My best advice with pinning is just don't do it too much, right? Again, I got kind of happy with it when I first started using Revit because, it worked so well, but it started causing problems. So, all right, let's see, what time is it? Oh, good. All right. One final thing today, and I will let you guys go, and we'll get on with walls and actual drawing on Monday, is we're going to talk about levels today, all right? And I am going to delete all of this stuff I have out of my current space. Oh, I have one pinned, so I'm going to unpin that. There we go. I've got a couple of things hiding over here. We'll delete those. So I don't have anything in my drawing board here. And then I'm just going to maybe draw one or two things. Let's see. Let's go back to architecture, wall. We'll just draw a little very simple building over there. There we go. Okay, so I want to talk about levels, all right? And this is going to really prepare us for our wall definition on Monday. And what levels allow us to do. Okay, let's talk about levels here. We've got them in our manual here. Is levels, oops, let's reset that. Levels allow us to define verticality in Revit, right, essentially. And so that 3D nature that Revit has built into the program, right, that is different from other computer-aided drafting programs, right, the ability to have that 3D model at the same time you're doing 2D drafting, that is defined by levels, all right? So inherently, when you open up, I think generally most Revit models, or templates, I guess I should say, you have a couple of built-in levels. You have to have them in order for the software to function. So they have a couple of default ones you'll always see. So if I go to my north elevation here, click, click, okay, I have a level 1 established and I have a level 2 established, right? You can see the level data markers. You can see these in any view that has like a sectional or vertical nature to it. So I don't see them in my floor plans. I don't see them in my details. I see them in elevation, I see them in section, and I now see them in 3D view, right? Although in previous, what is this, 2019? In 2018, you couldn't see them in 3D, okay? But you're gonna see your levels in any view that has a vertical nature to it. So if you're in a floor plan and you're like, where are my levels? Or how do I create a level? You're not gonna be able to do that in a flat view, okay? So I'm going to go back to my north elevation here. the first thing I want to point out, there's several things I want to point out, is that each of these levels corresponds to a floor plan over here in my project browser, right? So level 1, all right? So if I double click on level 1 here, click, I am viewing the geometry that is in between level 1 right here and level 2. Okay, that's what I'm viewing. So the way that this system works is in Revit there's something called a view range, all right? I'm going to just briefly show you what it means but not define and talk about how it works. Let's go down to our view range. Where is it? Am I missing it? Oh, maybe I can't get it in my sectional view. Let's go back to a floor plan. There it is. Okay. So I'm, that is like the worst sound in creation, isn't it? The view range, it establishes what you're seeing in your floor plate. So essentially right now, I am on level 1, okay, and I'm viewing a floor plan. And that floor plan has a cut plane that is defined in my view range to be 4 feet. All right. So essentially what that means is that whatever I'm seeing here, let me go back to my north elevation. I'm going to create a reference plane here. And use a pick and an offset of 4 foot. Whatever I'm viewing in level 1, I am viewing from this data marker up to a point 4 feet above that. Right? So this is my cut plane. So the walls are cut there and it's being cut at 4 feet and I'm looking down on my level 1. That's how my floor plan level 1 is defined. All right. That's how floor plan level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of the ones that I could generate are defined unless I change it. Right. And that is defined in the view range, which we're not going to deal with today. Okay. But I just want to establish how these levels are being viewed. All right. So number 1, we have level 1. When I create a level, I get one in my project browser, all right? When I look at that level in my project browser, I'm viewing it as if it were cut at 4 feet above that actual level. Okay, topic number 1. Topic number 2, this level data marker has a blue marker on it, all right? And a blue marker means that when I created it, it did create a corresponding floor plate over here in my project browser. Okay, so if it's blue, it has a corresponding floor plate with it. Now, it also, Revit is pretty smart and it knows generally that if you have a floor plan, you have a ceiling plan. So when you create a new level, right, that shows up over here, you get a floor plan, but then you also get a ceiling plan generated. All right, so when this level 1 floor plan level was created, I got a floor plate and I got a ceiling. Okay. All right, so those are a couple things I want to establish. Now, I'm going to talk about, there's another type of data marker that is generated in Revit, and it's a black one, and we'll talk about that in a second, okay? All right, so let's talk about how we generate these levels, okay? So if I go out to my architecture tab here, and I go all the way down here to level, LL, click. I can create a new level, which will create a new floor plan, which will also create a new ceiling plan, okay? You're going to notice that I come over here and I hover and I get my extension object snap popping up. I click, and you'll notice, I'm just going to make this a little weird so we can alter it. You notice that when I start moving my mouse, the level starts to preview. I click a second time and it's established, okay? Escape, escape. So by doing that, I just generated a new floor plan. Now, that floor plan, level 3, is at 16'6" above level 1. And you can view over here the floor plan and the ceiling plan that are generated with it. Okay? So again, this level 3, I'm viewing floor plan level 3 at a 4-foot cut above level 3. So this might get a little bit tricky as to whether I can even see anything, because I don't know if this wall is, within that 4 feet, so I might not even be able to see it. This is the annotation that represents the level. You're going to see that we have the data marker, right? We have the level name, we have the height above 0. I have a little check mark out here. If I click on that check mark, the little data marker disappears. It doesn't get deleted, it just visually disappears. And I can check mark over here and make it turn on that side. Or I can have it on both sides, right? Whatever I want to do. There we go. I'm going to click. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to grab this little grip at the end, click and drag this out. So it visually goes all the way through my architecture there, right? Okay, so these levels are extremely editable, which is really nice, okay? I showed you how to create a new level, so now I have level 1, 2, and 3. We generated level 3. What if we want to rename these levels? What if I don't want level 1 called level 1? What if I want it called main level? Well, if I click once, I click a second time, main level, enter. Would you like to rename the corresponding views? That means, do you want to rename level 1 here and the ceiling plan with that same name? Yes. So now I have main level, main level. Okay, I can change it back if I wanted. Level 2, what if I want it to be 8 feet above main level, right? Very easy to manipulate. I click on 10 once, twice, 8 foot, enter, and it moves down. Okay, I could rename it to upper level, enter. Yes, great. We could call this the attic, enter. Yes, great. I could take this down to 12 foot, enter, right? It's just super easy to manipulate these things, all right? And that's how we're going to create our levels, all right? These are really important, and when you're first using Revit, it's kind of hard to recognize, but the second you complete a full project, levels are probably one of the most important things to specify correctly at the first of your project, more so than wall types or window types or anything like that. You know, this will be one of those things where the first couple projects you do, it'll be iffy, but then you'll get a really good hang of it, and they're pretty important to get right the first time. Not to scare you, but you know, you want to pay attention to these levels. I think a lot of people go in and they just create levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you're like, okay, I have my levels created. Well, are they at the right height? Are there other structural levels I need? Are there, you know, there's just a lot of things that go into this. And the reason they're so important is because you define elements in your model according to them. All right. So if I grab a wall like that, okay, I picked my wall, you're going to notice here in its properties that its base constraint is the main level. Now it doesn't have a top constraint, but I can drop this down and change it to upper level. And you notice now this wall goes from main level to upper level, right? So because these elements so carefully define so many things in Revit, if you have to alter them halfway through your project, it just causes a lot of upheaval, okay? So if I pop into 3D, you can see that wall is lower than the rest because it has a base constraint and a top constraint, okay? Everything in Revit is associated with a level. So whether it's plumbing fixtures or doors or windows or walls or a roof or, you know, a floor plate or a foundation, everything is defined by a level. And so that's why it's so important to get them correct, okay? So I just showed you how to define a level by using the level command here, LL. I showed you how to create a level that has a floor plate and a ceiling associated with it, all right? There are going to be instances where you need to create levels that don't have floor plans associated with them, right? And that doesn't make probably a whole lot of sense now, but I think the best example I can give for creating a level without a floor plate associated would be to use it to help you create stairs, okay? When you generate stairs, usually you have the base of the stair, the landing, and then the upper portion of the stair, okay? On a commercial project, you want to be able to take, you know, the stairs from base level to landing, and then from landing to upper level. That's how, you know, you can design them that way. But you don't really need a floor plan just to take the stairs up to the landing, right? So not only can these levels act as floor plans, they can act as just data markers within your project, okay? So to create a level without a floor plate associated with it, I'm going to click on level. And we have this another tiny checkbox over here, right? I'm going to uncheck make plan view. And now I could create another level. Click, escape. I'm going to turn my little bobble off here, right? My little marker. Uncheck, check. I'm going to zoom in and grab that little grip. Pan. There we go. So this is a black marker, okay? Blue markers have floor plates associated with them. Black markers do not. So you do not see level 4 over here because I defined it to not have a floor plate associated with it, okay? Not to say that you can't still use it to define things, because you can, but it's just not going to show up as a floor plan, all right? And again, when you start working with Revit and professionally a little bit more, this will make a lot of sense to you. Right now it may not, but it will eventually, okay? So this is how you're going to create your level markers. Just a couple other things and we'll finish up here. You can click on your level marker here, and there's a little, what we call an elbow. So if one of these is so very close to the next that they're overlapping, right, I could use my little elbow and I could move it so that text doesn't overlap itself, okay? Pretty helpful. I've got these little, and if I want to make it straight again, I can do that, okay? I've got these little grips at the end here that move it back and forth. One thing I want you to notice is that these little grips, do you see how I get sort of an alignment with the rest of these? If I drag this out, oh, it's so nice. They all go at the same time, right? You have to have used AutoCAD to appreciate this, right? You don't have to draw a line and then stretch it out and hopefully it goes straight over there. Okay. Oop, oh, got a little crazy there for a second. I can grab these at the other end and do the same thing, right? They come and they align with the end there. Everything looks great. Okay. I can go to my east elevation now and I can see those markers. They don't look the same as the north elevation because the changes I made were view specific, which we'll talk about. Big topic in Revit, view specific items. But I can manipulate them per view, meaning I can turn these data markers on and off on whatever side I want them to be on, right? And they work. There we go. Click, I can drag that back in. Everything looks great. Okay. So that is how we are going to create our data markers, right? Our levels, essentially. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so no assignment tonight, or for this weekend.